In this video, we're demonstrating how to handle complex numbers. So we're going to be adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing complex numbers. So let's look at the first example here. We have a that says -9 plus 4i minus 3 plus 2i. So basically all we want to do here is combine like terms. So in other words, I can put the a pieces together and I can put the i's together. We need to distribute and remove the parentheses first, however. So for the first part of the expression, we don't have to do anything to remove the parentheses, just basically rewrite the expression. And then we'll bring in this negative as a -3 here, and then minus 2i. And then just combine like terms, right? So the -9 and the -3 will make -12, right? And so those have been used up. And then we have 4i take away 2i, which leaves you a positive 2i. And that's our answer. Now for example B, we're multiplying. All right, so you might notice that this is a difference of squares product, but we don't have to think about that to do the problem. We can just FOIL as normal and then it'll turn out the way it's supposed to turn out anyways. So let's look at -5 times +5. That'll give you -25. And -5 times +i gives you -5i. And then I times +5, of course, is plus 5i. And then I times I is going to give you positive I squared. So as I mentioned before, this middle term will cancel out because essentially it's a difference of two squares product. So we can cancel out that -5i and the positive 5i. We're left with -25 plus I squared. Now remember that I is equal to the square root of -1. So if you square the square root of -1, squaring a square root will remove the square root symbol, just leaving you -1. So remember that this piece here will just work out to be -1. So we end up with -25 minus 1, which is -26. All right, looking at the next one, it's 3 minus i divided by -3i. So when you have a fraction like this that has i's in it, you actually want to do something akin to rationalizing the denominator. In other words, we're going to multiply the top and bottom of the fraction by the same thing in the denominator. So we'll do -3i times the top and the bottom. And what's going to happen when we do that is we end up having -3i times 3 minus I over -3i times -3i. Now, if you think about that, of course, the -3i times +3 is going to give you -9i. And then you'd have -3i times a -i. That's going to give you a positive 3i squared on top. And on the bottom, you're going to end up with basically -3 times -3, which is a positive 9, and I times I, which is I squared. Now, we already talked about the fact that I squared is actually -1. That means the top will become -9i, and then it'll be plus 3 times -1. And in the denominator, it'll be 9 times -1. Because remember, all those I squared just become -1s. And then from there, you'll say -9i minus 3 divided by -9. Okay, we're almost done. Remember, we want the form of our number to be a plus bi, right? So we want to put the imaginary part at the end and the real part up front. So in order to do that, we first need to divide both terms by the denominator. So in other words, we'll have -9i divided by -9, and then minus 3 divided by -9. So I just put this -9 into the first part and into the second part of the numerator. Then from there, the negatives will cancel out, and so will the 9s, giving me just I. And then the back end will be a positive 3/9, and you know that that's the same as saying I plus 1/3, because 3 goes into itself once, goes into 9 3 times. And then lastly, because we want the format a plus bi for our answer, we're going to say that the real number part of this is 1/3, and that'll be added to I. Okay, so final piece here is part D. And again, we're going to do this idea of rationalizing the denominator, but when we have something that has two terms in it, we're going to use the conjugate pair, right? So we're going to multiply top and bottom here by 2 plus I. And then from there, we just have to FOIL out the two terms. So what's going to happen for the first product in the denominator is that it's a difference of two squares. So we can just go ahead and say that it'll be 4 minus I squared, right? That's the pattern that develops when you're multiplying that type of a product. That special product, you just square the first term, square the second term, put a minus sign between them. Now for the top part, however, we're going to have to do the foiling like we normally would. So 4 times 2 will give you 8. Then 4 times I, going to give you plus 4i. Then it'll be 5i times 2, or positive 10i. And then lastly, it'll be 5i times a positive I, which will end up giving you plus 5i squared. Okay, so let's go ahead and combine like terms then in the numerator. It'll be 8 plus 4i and 10i make 14i, plus 5i squared, that'll be 5 times negative 1. Don't forget that I squared is just negative 1. In the denominator, we'll have 4 minus negative 1, because remember, I squared is negative 1. Okay, continuing then to simplify, we're going to have in the numerator here 8 minus 5 plus 14i divided by 4 plus 1. And finally, we can say 8 minus 5 is 3 plus 14i over 5. To be strict about our form then, just to put it in the a plus bi pattern, we can do 3 over 5 plus 14 over 5i. Right, so I just put the 5 into the 3 and the 5 into the 14 to write it as 2 separate terms.